thanks for tuning in to the Crash Bang Boom podcast. For episode 258, we have drummer Ralph Alexander of Poppy, who can be heard on her most recent record, Flux. Ralph and I get into his time at the Musicians Institute, important teachers along the way, early influences, his time at Sunset Sound Studios and tracking the record Flux, and a whole lot more. So I certainly hope y'all dig the convo. Today's episode is sponsored by my man Carson Gant, aka OneUpLoops.com. Carson and his team spent a preposterous amount of time recording over 400,000 shaker, tambourine, and hi-hat loops at every possible tempo and multiple feels, with incredible mics and outboard gear for you to pick and choose. It's organized for you to find exactly what you need with just a few clicks, and everything feels and sounds incredible. You can sign up for free to check it out and gain full access to all 400,000 loops starting at $5.99 a month. No download limits, whatever you want, whenever you want. New loops, one-shots, and drum breaks are being added weekly, so check it out at OneUpLoops.com. Crash Bang Boom Podcast can be found on iTunes Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Luminary, Google Play, Podbean, and Amazon Music Podcasts, to name a few. Feel free to check out any of the previous 250-plus episodes and give me a like, a subscription, and or a positive review. Support is always appreciated, and thanks as always for tuning in. All right, here we go. Ralph Alexander, Poppy. Check out some of his killer playthroughs on his YouTube page that I'll include in the description of this episode. Crash Bang Boom.
Go mad with joy.
All right, I'm here with Ralph Alexander of Poppy, formerly of The Dose. Ralph, thanks for joining me, man. How's it going, dude?
It's going pretty good, man. How are you?
Doing pretty good. I'm digging this backdrop. I've only seen this view from the other side of the drums, so now I'm looking at it from the back side of the drums, out looking into this room where I've seen you do playthroughs and this and that and the other. Super cool spot, and we'll have to get into where you are and the house and the room and all that, but I do dig your home studio, man. I guess I took a stab at it earlier that you might be located in North Carolina or Tennessee from looking at the style of the house, and turns out I was 50-50 on that one. North Carolina. You're in North Carolina.
Yes, I'm in North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, which is where I grew up.
Gotcha, man. Tell me a little bit about this room and this house, because there's an interesting story behind it. And again, I've dug the sound of your videos and the whole design of the room, and I was kind of interested about it. So tell me a little bit about this house and this room and whatnot.
Yeah, this rehearsal spot is a house that my mother built back when I was 11 or 12. And here in North Carolina, when you get out kind of into the more rural areas, there's a lot of old tobacco barns, which is a very distinct architectural style for those type of barns. And she always thought it would be cool to take one of those and to kind of build one herself, but make it into a home.
Yeah.
So she built this in our backyard. She designed it. She had the whole thing built. And upstairs, and in the entire house, but upstairs is where I rehearse. On the walls, we have this old cypress wood that is from an old mill from a lake that's about 45 minutes outside of Wilmington called Lake Waccamaw.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom happened to find this old mill that was about fourth or fifth generation, and they were closing it down, and they had all of this old cypress wood that they had gotten out of the lake and the swamp in the surrounding areas.
Mm-hmm.
And she took it. She grabbed it, and they gave it to her, and she made the interior of the house out of it, which is amazing sonically, because upstairs the acoustics are just absolutely phenomenal when it comes to drumming. So
yeah,
the way that I have the kit set up in here, it just, everything sounds really nice. The mics sound really nice, and it's a fantastic spot to rehearse and record.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, in addition to sounding great, it looks super cool. I'm a fan of those cabins. I was talking to you a little bit about earlier, just being a fan of that sort of tri-state area between sort of southwest North Carolina, Tennessee, and Kentucky. I've done a bunch of drives down through Gatlinburg and through the Smoky Mountain National Park. That's like one of my favorite drives in the entire country. There's a really super cool one in southwest North Carolina along a river that I love. I'm spacing on the name of it right now, but I love that whole area. So you totally have cabin vibes there. It's super cool, man.
Yeah, you mentioned Tennessee, and I used to live in Nashville for a little period of time, and I've done that drive so many times driving from Nashville back here to Wilmington.
Yeah.
And driving through the mountains, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Hell yeah, man. Well, I know there was a Poppy tour that I was expecting to see the band on because I'd bought a ticket back in 2020 pre-COVID for Deftones and Gojira with Poppy opening on that. And, of course, that didn't materialize. It's been postponed, to my knowledge, at least twice by now. I'm not certain if is that even going on? And if so, is Poppy still going to be on that? Do you know?
As far as I know, it's been postponed to this year. And I do not believe that we're on that. No.
Gosh, that's too bad.
No, I know. Believe me, I was very bummed that didn't happen because I've always been a huge fan. Always been a huge Deftones fan, but I'm a huge fan of Mario from Gojira.
100%.
Probably the best, if not one of the best metal drummers out there right now. Just in terms of his 100%. Creativity and his power and his speed, and I was very much looking forward to having a masterclass every single night after our show, and to just kind of sit by his riser and watch him. But unfortunately, COVID happened. Yeah.
That's too bad, man. Sorry to hear that. And I mean, for me as well, as you said, Mario, 100% as far as a metal drummer, his independence, his groove, his soloing, everything about it. The guy's just a monster. And I'm a big fan of Abe Cunningham as well. So if I was in your place, I too would have been like, well, I guess I know what I'm doing every night after I play the show. Just be watching those guys back to back every night. Wow.
Yeah. We when we found out that everything was shutting down, that was a week before we were going to Europe for the European leg of our I Disagree tour. And I had in my mind mentally prepared, like, okay, we're going to do this tour in March. And then as soon as I get home, because the Gojira Deftones tour, I believe, didn't start until August. In my mind, it was, I'm going to get home and I'm going to just shed constantly.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be like a drummer's tour.
Totally.
The guys that are going to be in that audience. And there's no way I'm going on stage and opening for those two monsters and not having my shit together.
Oh, I'm telling you, man.
Yeah, I had a whole thing planned. I had a whole practice routine planned, and then, COVID happened, so.
Wow. What was some of the stuff that you felt like you were working on specifically to go out there to do that set to get you up to peak form?
It's funny because that predates all of the really crazy poppy stuff that's come out since then.
Right.
So when I look back on the I Disagree set, those songs, it's almost like they're a walk in the park compared to the stuff that we're playing now.
Right.
The stuff that she's sent me to learn and everything.
Right.
And to record. So at the time, it was just mainly going over just, endurance stuff. And because, again, those guys, Abe and Mario, they're such monster players. And the show that they put on is just so physical and it's over the top and it's amazing. And I just thought, I can't be a slouch up there. So I got to go get my cardio in every day and,
Totally.
But a lot of the things that I was planning on working on, to me, in my opinion, and I think a lot of guys probably feel this way, I hope they do, when COVID happened and everything shut down, first of all, I had 4 months where I didn't think about anything, nothing drum related whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, this was the first time in my life where everybody was in the same exact position as me.
Sure.
So I didn't have to worry that, if I'm not staying on top of my game, that so-and-so is going to get this gig and I'm not going to get it, or that this other guy is going to get called for this session and I'm not going to call. No one's getting called for anything.
Right.
There's nothing happening.
Right. Totally.
So I took that as sort of permission from the universe to just do nothing and relax. Yeah. And it was hugely beneficial, at least for me, for the first 4 or 5 months. And then, ever since then, it's like, all right, enough already. It's time to get back to work.
Yeah, absolutely, man. In the interim, did you find yourself doing more outdoors activities or picking up any hobbies or obsessing over any bands or reading books, climbing trees, shooting guns? What were you doing, man?
I picked up a whole new hobby and I got into woodworking. I started making stuff at the house.
Nice.
So I made I'm here with my niece and my nephew, and they are 9 and 10. So the first thing I did was I built them a big clubhouse out in the yard.
Awesome.
I got into other stuff, like I built my niece an easel and I built her a drafting table, and my nephew, I built him a little Lego table, and just completely disconnected from all the other stuff that I'd been obsessed over for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
And I'm over here, making squirrel picnic tables and enjoying the hell out of it.
Absolutely. That's super cool,
Yeah.
man. Well, with recording with Poppy, and as far as I Disagree, you mentioned kind of doing that set. That one is a little bit harder to tell for me as to whether or not there's sort of live instruments or at the very least live drums. On Flux, the one that was released in 2021, that one sounds more overtly like live instruments, I would say. Did you
Yes.
play some drums in the studio for I Disagree, or did that sort of start with Flux?
I Disagree is all programmed. It's all in the
Okay.
box.
Yeah.
I got involved with Poppy after that was done. We started playing together in December of 19, and I Disagree came out in January of 20.
Gotcha.
So I came in, right before it came out, but I wasn't involved with it. And then with Flux, everything was totally real. We were all in the studio together. It was totally live.
Nice.
And that was about an 8-day session for the bulk of it.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the process of that record was, I think we had 3 or 4 demos before we went in, but we really didn't know much, because I think initially it was we were going to do a couple songs, but then those went so well that we checked to see if the studio was booked, and it wasn't, so we just booked another week.
Awesome.
And the basic process for that record was really incredible, was that we would show up every morning, they would play us a demo and say, all right, well, this is the idea that we have, but disregard A, B, and C, and let's just build off this melody, or let's build off this chord progression or something like that.
Cool.
So the day would just basically begin. We would meet in the break room, have breakfast together, go over the song, go over the form, go over, kind of the vibe of it, and then go into the control room, or not the live room, and then get sounds that we thought were appropriate for that song, because every song on the record is completely different.
Yeah.
Just stylistically and just the approach for it. So
Sure.
I spent a lot of time with our producer, Justin, just we had a whole array of snare drums and cymbals and all kinds of stuff, but we would spend about an hour each day before we tracked just going over, okay, what snare sounds make sense for this song, or what cymbals make sense for this song, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would track it after lunch, and we banged out the whole record in just over a week.
That's awesome, man. Tell me a little bit about the studio that you tracked the drums at, because if I recall correctly, was that the one where you had some ties to Prince at some point in one of those rooms?
That is the legendary Sunset Sound in Hollywood.
Wow.
And that was the second time I've been at that studio. The first time was with the Dose. We were in Studio 1. But this time with Poppy, we were in Studio 2.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like I said earlier, the main kind of pinch yourself story with that particular room was that, from what they told me, this is the story that I heard, was that Prince himself wrote and recorded Purple Rain in that room. But the way he did it, which is hilarious to me, he had the studio go out and get him a bed, and they set up a bed in the studio, and he laid in bed, wrote the song, and recorded it in bed.
I mean, it's perfectly eccentric for what you'd kind of expect from such an eccentric guy, right?
Absolutely. And the other cool thing about Prince at Sunset is that they have this big courtyard that's right outside of the studio.
Uh-huh.
And in between breaks, you'd go out there and shoot hoops, because they have a basketball hoop out there.
Oh, my God. So you got the basketball story about Prince in your head from the Chappelle Show?
We didn't know it was Prince, but until the end. And then the one guy came out that the last day we were there, and he goes, that's Prince's basketball hoop. He had that put in when he was here. We were just like, oh, of course.
Oh, my God. The only topper for that, if you recall, people that recall the Chappelle skit, was, I believe, after Charlie Murphy got beaten by Prince, that he had him up for blueberry pancakes. So I don't know if you could have had some blueberry pancakes in honor of the room where Purple Rain was written and where Prince was shooting basketball out back, you'd really be like the trifecta of bizarre scenarios.
That would have been a good idea. Instead of pancakes, though, I think we had milkshakes every day. That was our end of the day
Nice.
reward. We ordered milkshakes. So.
With I Disagree, you had mentioned sort of rehearsing those songs as they were recorded, I guess. Were you expected to sort of interpret those sequenced drums, electronic drums, etc., sort of verbatim? Were you given a little bit of leeway in your interpretation and or ability to do fills, etc.?
Well, with the I Disagree stuff, we were all brand new. The whole band was new. She got a new backing band. So for me, when I got those songs, I pretty much interpreted them as close as possible because I don't want to be a new guy in a situation that didn't come in and just say, all right, you have your song, but I'm going to play it like how I want to play it.
Right.
You know? That's just not the vibe you want to do.
Right.
And honestly, you never know, playing for an artist, using Poppy as an example, I have no idea if she hears a song a particular way. So if she's attached to a certain fill or a certain beat or something,
Right.
I have no idea. I don't know what she hears. So
Yeah.
I don't want to be the asshole that comes in and, you know, starts throwing chops over it and saying, all right, well, it's my song now. I'm playing this. So I didn't do that. I learned everything pretty much as close as I could to the record. But since then, there's been a tremendous amount of freedom and independence to kind of interpret things however I want, which is great. It's a great working environment in that regard.
Sure, I think it's one way to let it evolve naturally that way, and if everybody's cool with it, you do that. But obviously, as you said, probably not the best business or professional decision to just roll in there and, as you said, be like, well, this is cool. Check out how I would play it, because clearly it would be that much cooler.
Right.
Probably might not sit the best with the artist, I would imagine.
No. I always look at these things as kind of everyone has their own lane. You know?
Yeah.
My lane is to take the songs that are given to me and to faithfully recreate them for the artist so that they're happy and that they don't have to think about anything.
Yeah.
So the last thing you want to be, it's kind of an odd juxtaposition, but you don't want them thinking about you too much.
True.
You want them knowing in the back of their mind, I don't have to think about him. I know he's got everything down back there. He's not, you know, blowing Tony Royster Jr. chops all over my R&B song that's supposed to be 2 and 4. You know what I mean? So.
Right. Totally, man. Poppy's an interesting artist, man. How has it been working with her, and the sort of trajectory of her records are pretty interesting as well, because while the first one was indeed, to my ear, I would say a little bit more cleanly produced and/or poppy, major key, etc., I would say that it's gotten both in getting darker. It's also gotten a little bit more rock. And then, of course, you've got more. Now you have the introduction of live players on the most recent record as well. So that's a progression. But how has it been working with her and getting these songs together and everything?
I will say that working for Poppy is probably the best gig I've ever had.
Nice.
She's absolutely amazing. She's an artist in every sense of the word. And she's very accommodating for everyone's musical input. So if you have an idea, she totally wants to hear it. If it doesn't work, it's no big deal. If it does work, great. And it's the first time I've ever had a gig where I've gotten the literal instruction to make it crazier.
That's awesome.
I've been on a session before where I've heard through from the control room, hey man, can you try that again, but pretend that you only have one arm?
Radically simplify what the fuck you're playing, i.e.
Yes. All right. I get it. With her, it's she wants you to be who you are as a player, and she wants to push you. And I'll say this, she has undoubtedly made me a better drummer and a better musician, because in inadvertent ways, but also intentionally. I'll give you an example. I never know what to expect, which is both terrifying, but also extremely empowering, because it forces me to constantly be ready with any possible genre.
Yeah.
So it's not just a metal gig. So if I get called for a session with her, I'm not instinctually thinking, okay, well, I got to make sure my feet are up to speed. I got to make sure my speed is, good with my hands and everything. To me, it's like, okay, I got to make sure I'm comfortable with about a dozen different genres before I go into this session.
Right.
I have no idea where we're going, which is, like I said, can be terrifying, but also it's empowering in a way that when you leave that session, you know that, okay, I can handle anything that she's going to throw at me. And it's always, the songwriting is always incredible. The ideas are always innovative, and I don't know, I could go on all day, but to me, playing with her has been really transformative for me as a player, for being as diverse as I possibly can be at all times, and just to be overall, a better musician. So I love it.
Nice. And when you rehearse with her, is that a process of going out to I would imagine LA, and then just rehearsing within a backlined environment kind of thing? Or, I mean, because if you're in North Carolina and that's in California, that's a trek, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean it's just 2 flights usually.
Yeah.
From here, it's not so bad. When we have rehearsals, it's usually about 10 days to about 2 weeks. But I would say that the first 3 or 4 days is just going through all the songs with everybody, and then every day after that is just running the set 2 or 3 times a day and just getting it as tight as you can possibly get it.
Super cool. When you think about sort of the pie chart of your sort of drumming influences and watching the way you play and sort of your execution and or the physicality of what you play, you strike me as someone who's been immersed in rock for some time. When you think about, I guess, sort of early records that had an impact on your playing, would most of those be in rock, et cetera? I'm not sure how old you are, so I'm not sure sort of what you were digging as a kid that might have formed some of your playing even still to this day, you know?
Well, first of all, I'm 19.
No, you are not. Yeah, I'm 22 now that you mentioned it.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So I think the most important record I've ever listened to was, I was 13. It was when I first started playing, and my oldest brother, Christopher, he went out. This was 2003. He went out and bought the recently released Led Zeppelin triple disc, How the West Was Won, their live album.
Oh yeah.
That Page had put out, remastered and everything.
Oh yeah.
He brought that home and he put it on, and I mean that was it. You listen to it, it's like, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah.
What is he doing back there? I can't even wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
And I had already, by that point, I'd already wanted to play. I knew I liked drums. I knew I wanted to play an instrument, but that was just what cemented it. That was it.
Yeah.
So I think my first kit was a CB percussion kit. I don't even know if you've ever heard of that. You heard of CB percussion?
Oh, I got fired from a music store because a family came in, her mother and her son, and she goes, what do you think? Should we purchase this? And I was like, I think you'd be better off getting something used from the newspaper. And the owner heard that, and she fired me because so I'm very well aware of that brand of drums, having been fired for telling a potential customer to not buy them.
Well, I will say this. They got me through my first year, so
awesome.
I was grateful to them for that.
Yeah.
But we found it in the newspaper. This is before Craigslist. Went out and found it in the newspaper, went and picked it up and set it up. And I had a teacher here in town. His name's Tony Mallard, and he was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal player. I mean, some lessons I would go and I would just watch him and say, just play. And he would play, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll try and figure that out when I go home, that kind of thing. But
right.
Took lessons from him for a while, played on this little CB percussion kit. And I think actually the funny story is that when I turned 16, my mom told me, she said, I will get you a car or I will get you a professional kit. Which one do you want? And I didn't end up driving until I was 19. So
right.
I chose the kit.
Yeah.
And it was a gold sparkle classic maple Ludwig kit.
Awesome.
I still have it. And ever since I started listening to Zeppelin to begin with, like Ludwig that was it. There's no other drums I ever wanted to play.
Mm-hmm.
So every kit I've ever had has been a Ludwig kit. And I would say, in terms of the records that we were talking about, the triple disc Zeppelin live record is definitely number one. I still listen to it to this day and pick it apart.
Yeah.
In terms of other influences, obviously Slayer, early Slayer, Rain and Blood, Seasons in the Abyss.
Oh yeah.
Pantera was a huge influence.
Absolutely.
My buddies and I, we listened to Cowboys from Hell and Vulgar and Far Beyond, just nonstop. I mean, we played those records all the time. And early Sepultura, that was a big one for me. I think a lot of those records where the drumming was just so prevalent and featured so heavily.
Totally.
Obviously, as a drummer, you're going to gravitate towards those.
Yeah.
And then, later in life, now that I'm older, a lot of records I listen to, it's a lot about songwriting and, the genius behind that. And,
right.
I've been a huge fan of Alice in Chains for the past, 3 or 4 years now.
Hell yeah.
And just because the songwriting is just so powerful to me, and it's just amazing what they do. So I would say the older that I get, I still, obviously, you're always going to listen to the drums first.
Uh-huh.
But you start listening, at least for me, in my case, you start listening to the song as a whole, which inadvertently helps you as a drummer, because if you go into a session, let's just use Poppy as an example. If I go into a session with Poppy and she's playing me an idea, 16-year-old me would say, cool, how many fills can I throw over this and be like Igor from Sepultura,
Sure.
What can I do to have like a crazy territory style beat? That I don't think that way anymore. And I think that's important for guys to start thinking, how can I best serve the song, and what does the song need from the drums? Not what do I need from the song for myself. You know what I mean?
Right. That's cool that you have a classic rock and some of the older metal as your foundation, and the Bonham thing for sure. I mean, he's probably about as universal as it gets for most drummers. And I mean, I agree with you. Hearing him live and seeing some of the video for those DVDs when they came out, I was amazed to see like early, like Led Zeppelin 1 era, like 1970 Zeppelin, how he was playing, and you kind of get a sense of the bombast that he had because the drums were recorded in such an amazing fashion on those Zeppelin records, and they only got bigger and more badass. I mean, by the time you get to like Led Zeppelin 4 and you hear something like When the Levee Breaks, I still can't believe it. I put that record on and I'm like, fuck, there it is. That's basically the greatest sounding drums that I've ever heard, Mm-hmm. And then there was the live version, and you could still hear a discernible trace of that same live sound that was captured on the records. But you had kind of that, especially again in that early form of himself, just such high energy and bombast. It was amazing when I saw that, dude. It was a revelation. And I loved him before that, but I was like, wow, to physically see it, how he was playing in those early days, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I don't think you can be a rock drummer and not look up to Bonzo.
Yeah, for real.
One of the pitfalls that I always try and avoid, and for a while there, I don't see it as much as I used to, but for a while there, it seemed like drummers were so obsessed with him that they wanted to sound exactly like him.
Right.
And I personally, this is just me speaking, I love Bonham. He's my favorite drummer by far.
Yeah.
But I don't want to sound just like Bonham.
Uh-huh.
I want to take a lot of my favorite aspects of his and a lot of the things that he did, but make them your own.
Right. Absolutely.
Chamberlain from Smashing Pumpkins, he had a great quote one time. He said that drummers, he was talking about musicians, but he was in general, but he was using it for drummers. He goes, the best drummers are thieves that you can't figure out where they stole it from.
Sure.
So if you take a lot of the coolest concepts from Bonham or some of these older guys, but you play them in a way that it almost sounds like you came up with it, and I think you've done a pretty good job.
Totally. Yeah, there's something to be said for sure for acknowledging the spirit of someone's playing and or the intensity or maybe some of those intangibles and or ultimately sort of conceptually maybe what was going on within the context of a song. If you can have an understanding of that, I think Jaco Pastorius or Victor Wooten or one of those just meteor bass players said something to that effect, like understand sort of the concepts behind it. And then you don't necessarily need to rip anybody off because you have your own interpretation of what ultimately they were going for or conceptually what was happening. So that's sort of the other workaround for being influenced, Of
course. No, I agree.
Yeah, man. With you putting out some of these video playthroughs and whatnot, it's such an intense and competitive world, especially now for myself being older. And seeing the proliferation of just drumming on YouTube and the Guitar Center drum offs and everything and sort of how that's affected so many things, the ripple effects of that and soloing and just chops in general, they're at such a high level across the board. Is it kind of daunting mentally to prepare yourself to put out a video and know that you're going to be sort of immersed in that world, or do you just focus on what you're doing, play to your best ability, and that's all you can do anyway?
I'll put it this way. I went to music school. I went to Musicians Institute when I was 20.
Okay.
And of all the things that I learned when I was in school, all the different techniques and approaches to the kit and styles and all that stuff, all of that pales in comparison to the main lesson that I learned, and that was that there's always a bigger fish. There's always someone faster.
Sure.
There's always someone that's doing exactly what you want to do, but doing it 10 times better.
Yeah.
The only thing that's not out there is another you.
Right.
So as long as you play with soul and with who you are as a person and believe in what you're playing, there's no one else that's going to play like you. There's no one else that's going to think like you. There's no one else that's going to sound like you. So I don't get too hung up on seeing guys that are just absolute aliens playing.
Yeah, totally.
I think they're absolutely impressive, and they're just phenomenal. I mean, I'll admit there are some days where I don't want to go on Instagram and see. I don't need to see a 3-year-old play Bleed in Thailand with one foot and make me just want to quit everything.
Totally.
Like some days I don't need that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I think there's so many amazing players out there, and I mean this sincerely and wholeheartedly. I'd never get jealous of people because everybody is unique in their own way, and everybody plays their own way in their own style. And I'm just happy to be in a gig where I'm challenged personally to be a better player and to be a better musician. So if I get the chance to do these playthroughs, I asked them last year. I said, hey, I have a lot of time on my hands. We're not touring and stuff like that. These songs that you've had me play on, they're some of my best work, and I would love to demonstrate that with some videos that I can make. And they said, sure, absolutely. And I put those out. For me, I'm proud of the work that I've done with Poppy, and I just like putting that out in the universe and just having people, hey, if you want to check this out, check it out. If not, then that's all fine. If you want to see a guy that does backflips and all kinds of stuff and plays at 3,000 BPM, that's totally cool too. That's your thing, so go for it.
Right.
So in terms of being competitive or feeling like you have to be the top guy on Instagram or YouTube or whatever it is, I never feel that. I like making what I'm making, and I like putting it out there, and I hope people see it and want to practice too.
I hear you. I feel the same way now, where it's ultimately me putting it out. I'm responsible for it. I can only play the best that I can play in that given moment. But it took me a long time to be able to sort of recognize that. It definitely came with age. I would say easily the first 15 years of me playing. And I mean, I got my first kit in 91. So then again, we're also talking about a different time where the internet and ultimately YouTube and some of these social media aspects of now modern life weren't really a force to be reckoned with then. So I didn't have the awareness. So in my mind, I was like, I'm really doing this thing. And then, you go, it was all about just going to shows. I was lucky to see so many amazing players in New Orleans every the weekend, just going out and just getting my mind blown by all these killer drummers. And soloing was a thing as well with a lot of those guys. So I was seeing drum solos a lot.
Yeah. The lessons that you were getting in New Orleans going to shows, I got all of those in one day. And that was orientation at MI. Because up till that point, I was here in my hometown, and I was playing in 6 or 7 bands, and I thought I was hot shit. And the way that I had gotten to MI was that I had won this competition. It was a full ride scholarship competition that they had online. I entered, and it was 6,000 people from all over the world, and it was you got called out to the finals, and the finals were like 10 people, and we played on stage.
Wow.
And the top winner got a full scholarship and $10,000. And I had won that. So I was going into MI. I don't want to say I was going in there with a big head, but I definitely felt confident.
Yeah.
I was like, because a month prior, I was here working in a restaurant. And then within 1 month's time, I was at orientation.
Wow.
So I walked into orientation thinking, I know exactly what I'm doing. And then by the end of that day, I said to myself, I don't know a fucking thing about what I'm doing. Not only do I not know, and I promise you I thought this, I don't even know what I don't know.
Right.
Because they had come to me and said, okay, we're going to test you to see what level we put you in. So I think at that time, there were 3 levels. There was first, second, and third. And I thought to myself, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to ace these entrance exams, and I'm going to test right into level 3, and I'm going to be the fastest graduate here at MI, and I'm going to do it on a full. I'm not even going to need the full scholarship. Like that was where my head was at.
Yeah.
And then I go in there and say, okay, play paradiddles. Okay, barely get through it. They go, okay, here's a piece of music. Do you know how to read? I can play Raining Blood. No. Do you know how to read? Try and play this. Fail. All right. Now I'm in level 1 reading. Now I'm in level 1 technique. Now I'm in, level 1 drum set independence, all this different stuff. And then by the end of that day, I was so deflated. And it was, I don't want to say it was like being at rock bottom because it's not the same thing. But in terms of being a drummer and feeling like I had a grasp on things, that's when I realized I don't know shit.
Right.
And these instructors here, they do. And they're telling me that I don't know shit.
Right.
So it's time to get out of my own head and to buckle down and to really devote myself to being a better drummer and a better student and a better musician. And that's what I did for, I think that was 2 years. I was there a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything. I had no life. I didn't date. I didn't go outside anywhere. I went into my rehearsal room every single day at MI.
Wow.
I went to my classes and I practiced, and I wanted to make sure that I got out of there knowing exactly what I didn't know, because I didn't know at that time.
Right.
I had no idea what these different concepts were. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Samba? What the hell is that?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Well, as someone who studied myself, it can be the lines can be blurred a little bit in today's age, again, because of just how much information is out there, how much drummers and musicians and artists can emulate someone else, etc. And I was watching you, and I was like, I feel like this guy probably studied both. Sometimes if somebody sounds like technically proficient, I can look at them and see if maybe their hand technique is a little strange, or their posture, or ergonomically, and all of that stuff kind of checked out. And I was like, if I had to guess, I would think that maybe this guy studied. So I guessed right both on that and the North Carolina thing. I'm feeling pretty perceptive here, man. I'm really nailing this shit.
You nailed it, absolutely. And I will say, in terms of COVID and what we've done with this past year and a half, or what I've been able to do, the biggest improvement I've had, because when I went into COVID, I knew I was going to have all this time. The number one thing I thought to myself was, I don't want to come out of this. First of all, I don't want to come out even the same player that I was when I came into it, right? Because if we have all this time, at bare minimum, you have to come out better than what you were when you went into it, right?
Right.
I certainly don't want to be worse player than I was when I came into it. Right? That's just a complete total loss.
Right.
So with all this time, I thought to myself, well, what are my biggest insecurities? And my biggest insecurity since the beginning, since I started playing, and still to this day, are my feet.
Same here.
Yeah. Having control over my feet, dynamics, speed, all of that kind of stuff. So I knew that I had a problem with my feet. At least I felt I did. So I completely took apart my kit. I got it down to my throne, and I messed around with the throne height. I went down to the absolute bare basics, and I thought, okay, where am I most comfortable with my throne height? Because for a while there, I had it crazy high.
Which is tough.
Very tough. So what I realized was that my throne was extremely high, and I was way too close to my kick drum. So if you just think about the mechanics of your, people can't see what I'm doing, but if you think about the mechanics of your knee and your feet, right? If you're too close, then all of a sudden your kneecap is in front of where your heel is.
Correct.
And that's just terrible technique. And I'd been doing that for so long.
Wow.
So what I did was I lowered my seat. I pulled it back. I probably half a foot, a ton.
Yeah.
And I completely re-engineered the way I set up my kit. And a lot of the stuff I took from friends of mine that went and studied with Dave Elich.
Right.
They didn't tell me, in detail, because, it's his lesson. I don't want to poach
Sure.
on his lesson and get it for free.
Yeah.
But they said, the fundamentals that they talked to him about was just how you set up your kit and how it affects your playing.
Right.
And I had always known that. And I think a lot of drummers know that that's a thing. But like me, when I was a kid, you get caught up in like, oh, well, Travis Barker has all his cymbals. They're all totally flat and they're all totally symmetrical. And it's
Right.
like, that's great for him. That might work for him to have everything totally flat. And it looks really cool.
Looks cool.
But that might not work for you. That
No.
might not, for what you're playing, that might not be the best thing.
Right.
So that was a big rewiring for me personally, was just saying like the kit needs to feel best before it looks a certain way.
Yes.
And I have to get my feet and my legs in a position to win, because right now I'm setting up in a way that they are absolutely not. So the biggest thing for me during COVID was just really starting over from scratch with my feet and my legs. And it's paid off hugely so far.
That's awesome for you. I purchased a double bass lesson focused specifically on double bass, trying to even that out. Was a little more conscious, not so much on the height, but maybe the position of the seat. And I had taken a lesson with Ken Schock, who played with Candiria, killer drummer, quite a few years ago. And that was something he stressed as well. Was he basically broke the kit down and was like, I was basically playing it like I had as a single foot player, like how I started out, and then I was trying to play double bass like that. But my body was off center. I was off center with the pedals. I was leaning to one side, so then it was making my left foot weaker. There was all of this mechanical shit that was going on that I of course, wouldn't have had an idea about, and he kind of helped me with that. But that's interesting, too. I think for a lot of drummers, because, we eat every day. We use our hands, despite how ambidextrous someone is or isn't. It's not like unless you're Daniel Day-Lewis and my left foot, you're not eating with your foot, as a film reference. So it's just the training that it takes is more substantial, and that's something that I too realized and that I've been working on. And I saw your feet and I was like, man, this guy has really good feet. So maybe in a few months, I can get to some of that level myself, man. It's been a stubborn ass process. It drives me crazy, to be honest.
It's absolutely stubborn. And the big problem that I've had with myself is overcoming poor technique that I grew up on. Absolutely. Not resorting back to it when a certain part comes up that's faster than what I'm comfortable with yet. I know. Because I will, if I don't catch myself, I will go back to very poor technique very fast. Yeah. So it's an ongoing exercise, and I think the best thing that drummers can do, or any musician or anyone in general for that matter, is just recognizing when you have something that needs attention, it needs work, and making a conscious effort to say, okay, I'm going to change this and I'm going to make it better. Absolutely. I put in a lot of time every day because I have the time. But, even if you put in 5 minutes a day to change something in your life that needs changed or needs improved, it's a daily thing. It's not anything. If ever there was an example of something that's not going to change overnight, it's your double bass playing. That's just, that is months to years of your life that you need to spend on it. So I think it's the perfect example for anything in anyone's life. Just spend a little bit of time on it every day, and you'll see changes over time. Hell yeah, man. Well, Ralph, man, thanks for rapping, dude. I appreciate the time, and I hope 2022 is a good year for you. Maybe I'll catch you out playing live. That would be killer. And yeah, man, I hope it's a good year for you. Absolutely. Stay in touch, and if we come to a city nearby, just hit me up, and we'll hang out. Sounds good, my man. Thank you for having me. Yeah, man. All right, everybody, that does it for this episode. Thanks to Ralph for hanging and talking about Poppy and Musicians Institute and Sunset Sound and Prince, and having the confidence in yourself and your preparation to just focus on what you do and what you do best. It was a good one. Hope y'all enjoyed it. We'll catch you on the next one. Crash, bang, boom.